Hello and welcome to our lesson 3 of our Just Java project. In this project we were introduced to object-oriented programming. A couple tools that I have open. One is our Get Crackin' that we have known and become to love, and then our Android Studio application behind it. And we have our our Java file open. So first of all, I'm going to kind of look at our Get Crackin' here, and couple things that we have here. If I hover over my lesson 4, which is checked out, you see lesson 3 underneath it. And what we have basically done is we branched off of lesson 3 for our lesson 4, so we can have a new branch. And we did that for when we were done with lesson 1. We branched it for lesson 2. We have lesson 3. I'm going to go ahead and check out lesson 3 by double-clicking it. Now we have lesson 3 checked out. And lesson 4 is on the same playing field, if you will, as lesson 3 because we haven't started lesson 4 yet. We'll start that soon. Since we were done with lesson 3, we did merge that into our development, making sure that our program is working great before then we pushed it to our main. So that way our main is, again, what's out in production, what are going to be on people's cell phones. We don't want to have any bugs on that. So we test it out all in our development before we push it. So looking at lesson 3, you can see that between lesson 2 and 3, we updated a couple things. I've updated my operating system on my Android Studio. So you can see that we did a couple things, but then we got into I started naming them 3.2, if you will. Lesson 3, the second thing we did here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and take a look at our Just Java file and see what we have done here. And we changed the name of the variable for display to display quantity. All right, we wanted to be a little bit more specific, so we added the name quantity to it, and we are still calling the parameter quantity, or the other variable quantity, which gives us how many times we've pressed the increment or decrement buttons on our application, and I'll show that here in a little bit. For the decrement method, we also changed the name of the display quantity to display to display quantity, and again we are still calling the quantity variable to determine again how many times we press the increment or decrement button on our application that you've seen me explain in our previous lesson, in lesson 2. Also down here in the display quantity method, we changed, or we're going to be working eventually on changing this to a return value, but basically we needed to change this to reflect our new variable for display quantity. So we have our display quantity down here, from display to display quantity. All right, so let's go ahead and see what we did in the next Get Crackin' commit. And here in Java, we changed this display quantity to int numbers of coffees. All right, so we changed this to number of coffees. Again, it makes a little bit more sense. Instead of just number, but actually the number of coffees. How many coffees are we ordering? All right, we then came down to our quantity text view, and we set it to number of coffees. Again, a little bit more relevant to our project. All right, so we then jumped into inserting the calculate price method. So back in our Java file, we created a new method. So we have a new method, multi-line comment, and it's called calculate price. And it is calling the quantity variable, which is an integer. And so here it is. We have a new price equals how many coffees we ordered, quantity times $5 per cup of coffee. So we made this method, all right, and it is calling the parameter quantity. And we're going to keep moving on, adding price per cup at parameters. So we created a parameter in Java. So here we have our calculate price, and it is calling the arguments for quantity. All right, and this is actually how much it is per cup of coffee. We're just kind of playing around. How many cups we actually have. All right, and then down below our calculate price method, we have a couple parameters. Quantity, again, it's going to refer to this argument. And then price per cup. The price per cup is set to 10. So we took out the 5 where we set it, and we put it into an argument of 10 for the price per cup. And then we have our price, which will refer to the price per cup, 10. The quantity we get from the parameter quantity, which is called by the argument quantity and calculate price, and times price per cup, which is set to $10. All right, so moving right along, we took out some parameters and arguments for the calculate price method. So we took some of these things out. For example, we took out the parameters and arguments, and we simplified it a little bit in our code. So let's go ahead and see what we did. We deleted the display price method. Again, what I love about GetCrackin is, well, what if we deleted it and we needed it? We can always go back and look at our previous versions. And there we took out the display price method. We weren't using that. We have a new method that we're using now. All right, and we just updated our display method to reflect our order summary. And so here we have updated our order summary. Okay, so with that, I'm going to kind of move GetCrackin off to the side and take a look at our just Java here and kind of talk about our object-oriented programming that we kind of have been talking about at the beginning of what was introduced to us. And so I'm going to scroll down to, first of all, this is a class, all right? And we have a class, and our class is called main activity, all right? And we learned a little bit about, we watched a lot of videos in this lesson. They talked a lot. Some of this stuff went over our head. I'm looking forward to do a little bit more research, but basically what this extends does, it goes out to the internet and it uses like a library, if you will, for other parts of our methods, and we'll talk about that briefly. I'm not going to be the best to explain it, but it was pretty cool what they were talking about, but it is using libraries that people have already made out on the internet. All right, but getting back to our class, we have a bunch of methods that are being used within our class. For example, on create. When people actually load up the application for the very first time, it is going to call through the class the onCreate method. And if you see this r.layout activity main, the activity main is calling this file. It's another file in our file system, the file activity main.xml. And so here's all our text views. This is how it looks. If I hit my split code, maybe blow that up a little bit with some plus signs here. So when it will actually call this file, and it has everything from our buttons. If I click on buttons, you can see that button, which is our decrement button, our text view, which is how many cups of coffee we have, our increment buttons. It is actually calling that file. This is our object-oriented programming. All right. Then we have a method called increment, and we created it to where every time we press the increment button, the quantity is increasing by 1. Quantity plus plus, and then it will display that quantity, all right, for us. All right, and so we then have our decrement method. Again, these are all within the class main activity. All right, and you can see the name of this Java file is main activity. You don't need to put the .java in there. The Java programming itself will know that. It is very smart, but it is the main activity. So we have our decrement method. We also have a submit method. Again, these are all within our class of main activity. All right, and so we also created our new calculate price method, our display quantity, so it knows how many we actually have, and then when we actually press the order button here. Now also down below here, the display quantity is referencing an ID. The ID is quantity text view. So if we go, again, part of our object-oriented programming, it's relying on another file here. If we go, and here is our order summary text view. Here is the ID. They reference them a little bit different between the XML. Oh, sorry for that bell in your ear. I hope that's not too loud. This ID in the XML compared to the Java file, but here it is. We have our order summary text view. All right, and so it's calling that text view, and so when we actually click order, it will put our order summary right here. It will actually call the order summary method. all right, which is our, it'll, the submit order method here and give all this information right here, all right? So kind of cool. Again, let's kind of take a look now and see what it looks like on our phone. So I'm going to run our emulator, and so I'm going to go ahead and press play here and see what it looks like actually on the phone. No emulator is running. Well, it will take a second. It's starting up. You can see this is the first time I've started it. I probably should have loaded this up a little bit beforehand, but you know what? You guys are very patient. I appreciate that. So we have our emulator on, and sometimes once this emulator is, you can see it's still building. So sometimes I will like to go away for the new project. Our project Gradle is installing, it's launching activities, and there it is. So finally it loaded up. We'll kind of move that off to the side. So we start pressing the plus button. We want 4 cups of coffees. When we hit order, you can see that we thank you for ordering 4 cups of coffee. We will owe you $20. Your order will be right up. So again, this is, you guys, where object-oriented programming is coming into play. We have our class, all right, main activity, and it is using all of these methods. And so I kind of wanted to know a little bit more, so I did a little Google searching on object-oriented programming, and here's Wikipedia, a great resource. And object-oriented programming is a programming paradigm based on the concepts of objects, which can contain data. Data in the form of fields, often known as attributes or properties, and code in the form of procedures known as methods. So they call these procedures as well. For example, this is an onCreate. I've been calling them methods. My students have been calling them methods. They're also known as we have learned here, well, let me stretch this out a little bit. They are known as procedures. All right. So again, just different naming, but all the same thing. In object-oriented programming, they're designed by making them out of objects that interact with one another. Object-oriented programming languages are diverse, but most popular ones are class-based, meaning that objects are instances of classes, which is also determine their types. So here's our class. Here's all of our different methods that have the different instances based on their type. So, for example, this is an increment where we have a void. We're not returning any value. But let's go down to our calculate price where we are returning a value. We are telling it that it is going to be an integer, and we want to return that value of price when we're done with this calculate price message. So up above in the submit order, price is going to equal what that method. So this method right here, or this variable price, is calling the calculate price method. It's going to look at the quantity, how many we have, and in this case we had 4, and it's going to times that by $5, which gives us $20. 5 times 4 is $20. It will then return the value price, which price now will come up to be $20. 4 times 5, all right? And then it will say, hey, thank you for ordering quantity. It concatenates that with quantity, how many cups of coffee we got, which is, thank you for ordering 4. It's concatenating that with our quantity, 4 coffees, amount due, and then it's concatenating it with the variable price, which here goes to the calculate price method, which I just explained. And so it tells us that the amount due now is the value of price, which is $20. So really cool object-oriented program, a valuable tool set to have in your tool bag. I can't wait to continue to learn more. Lesson 4, I think we're really going to get into learning a lot more about object-oriented programming, so stay tuned. But our application is coming alive and we're learning a lot.